Now I'm not mad. I'm just a little disappointed.
Foot race to their sideline. Touchdown, Oregon!
Ladies and gentlemen, children of all wages, welcome back to the show. There is a lot to cover and a lot to deal with, and so there's just a lot to go through right now, and we'll just move right on through it. As of this moment, I apologize for being late to the game. I had some issues with my laptop that were unforeseen when it was happening. Sorry, I'm watching the Colorado-Nebraska game. That'll date this show for you. We are about less than an hour from kickoff to Oregon-Boise State. But that's only part of the story that we're going to talk about today. And once again, this might be a little bit aged now, but unfortunately, this was planned on happening to... wow. I was planning on having this happen on Monday. As you can see, I have a lot of stuff going on in my brain and my mind and in action and events. I've aside from working full time, I have had 2 photo shoots within a week as well. And I had a third that got canceled. So I've been very, very busy trying to keep up and also having the issues with my laptop. I'm using my old one right now because I'm having to deal with the new one that I had that had issues. I guess wasn't so new. I guess I would not recommend Amazon Refurbished because that's where I bought it from, and it didn't really work that well. It had too sticky of a key, and insert your joke however you would like on that. So the elephant in the room this past week is the Idaho-Oregon game, and they barely squeaked out a win, 14-24. And yeah, show's over. That's all. No, I'm gonna tell you a little story real quick, because on Saturday I was mad, very mad, and a portion of that is because in my head I'm thinking, all right, my family, my older family, and then me towards the end. We grew up with this team being not the greatest team of all time, needless to say, putting that very nicely. And in the 80s especially, the team was it wasn't known for the facilities that it has now, that's for sure. It was known for basically a weight room in a basement with some leaky pipes. And it wasn't obviously until the late 90s that Phil Knight really invested in the team and really upgraded their facilities. And so all this time of that, and then in the 2000s, once the Ducks finally got better, they were reaching for the stars, if you will. They were overperforming with a lesser roster, let's say, on average. I'm not denigrating any past rosters because there are some that are my favorites of all time. But the obvious critique was that the Ducks were soft and they were gimmicky and all flash and they couldn't win in the trenches and all that kind of stuff, despite the fact that there was a good chunk of time there that they had built up quite a legacy of good offensive linemen who made it to the pros and did very well as defensive linemen. In fact, the Ducks' first 5-star recruit that they ever got was Haloti Ngata, who was, in fact, a star D lineman and was the backbone of the defense in the early to mid-2000s for the Ducks. Igor Olshansky, I think, was maybe a 4-star. He was right beside Haloti Ngata, and so it's not like we really had a long history of being pillow soft like all the SEC homers like to say. And in fact, that reputation had followed them so hard that Chip Kelly purposely, apparently, I just figured this out, or found out about this a few days ago, that when Chip Kelly would play Stanford, obviously the going theme was that the Ducks were soft as marshmallows. And Stanford obviously was a very physical team, and therefore the Stanford was going to run all over them because they were more physical, so on and so forth. And Chip Kelly, whenever he played, is probably why there were some frustrating moments in those games, because he was trying to beat them running the ball, because he was basically trying to establish the fact that they're not soft. And so I spent all these years that they're never overrated. In fact, at the beginning of the 2000s, you had the Joey Harrington team that arguably should have gone to the national championship that year, considering Miami beat Nebraska 34-0, and Oregon was in line that year behind Nebraska to have made it to the game, were Nebraska not to make it as well. And I remember that year as well, when I was a mere fourth grader at school, we were often talking about how Oregon should have been in that game. And they weren't. They got BCS'd. And I have arguments that I have a debatable argument / theory that the reason why we're in the playoffs right now is because of Oregon, especially in the early to mid 2000s, and maybe even to some degree, maybe like a Boise State at one time, or a Hawaii during the Colt Brennan era, but definitely Oregon, because they seem to have been snubbed more often than not when given the chance BCS-wise on that. But that's neither here nor there, because all those years I would defend them. I would stand on my two toes, and I would stand tall in the face of all the issues that would happen, or when my family moved to the Corvallis area, to Beaver Country, I stood tall and I represented my Ducks. And even when I was at Oregon State going to school, I still represented my Ducks, and I said essays on why I'm still a fan of theirs. And I carried the torch. I was the guy carrying the flag. I was like Mel Gibson in The Patriot. You know, I said, these colors ain't running. And then finally, we sort of get to a point where on paper we have the strongest roster that we've ever had. And that was the big debut of that roster and this team. All the hype, all the internal marketing, all the short documentaries that they made in-house that were selling the team and the brand or whatever, and it was 24-14 to Idaho. Now, I am not discrediting Idaho. They are a great team. They played a great game. It was seemingly, I guess, maybe an awkward matchup that really played kind of in Idaho's favor, that they showed up and they had a plan to try to be spoilers, and luckily the Ducks survived. But the problem is that this team, the Ducks, were supposedly supposed to be in the race for the national championship. Number 3 in the country, FBS, in the Big Ten. They're also favorites to win the Big Ten. They'll take on Ohio State. They'll put up a good fight, because also with that Autzen, they have a chance against Michigan. And then if they beat Washington, finally they get that sort of demon off of their chest, then it's go time, and the Ducks will finally pull it away. Now, I think this has a lot to do with people's eagerness to see them finally win one. Fans, and not necessarily fans included, but definitely pundits who might be sort of internally rooting for them. They're trying to call Natty every year. This is an intervention for the fans out there. They're not winning it this year. Now, you can timestamp that and call me wrong at the end of the year, but I'm trying to be realistic here, especially after Georgia dog-walked Clemson, and Texas is looking very, very good. With the way that was played against Idaho, a very good, a very elite FCS team, but that's the problem. On paper, you're supposed to be that much more of a tier ahead of them anyway. No matter how good they played, they're still an FCS team, and you're still top ranked in the FBS. You're top of the food chain on that. So I should have laid my bets down if I wasn't in California on betting the under, because for some reason, even as a 44.5 point favorite, I didn't think it was going to be a 10-point game, but I certainly thought that they were going to, they weren't going to cover that spread. They were probably going to win by a few possessions. But that's how it turned out. And kudos to Idaho for one. They played a great game. They came to play. They treated it like the Super Bowl, like their Super Bowl, and in a way it kind of was. And they were trying to go into Autzen and do a crazy move, and they almost pulled it off. And this is why this goes back to what I've said in previous episodes. Any given Saturday, any given Sunday. I'm going to tell you another story, I guess. That was sort of convoluted. But the whole point of that was I was angry at first because of basically being a traumatized fan of Northwest teams, and specifically the Ducks. But the next story, I'm not going to do it to sort of talk about be Uncle Rico, if you will, and relive the glory days. But when I played JV basketball, when I played JV basketball, it was one of the first years I played JV, but we were basically varsity too. Like, we were that good of a team. And, a lot of it had to do with the fact that there were a lot of seniors in the year before us that basically took up a lot of roster space. And, you had to have some money as well, I guess, some clout that way. But our JV team was basically varsity too. And that year also I was put there because I moved positions. I had a bit of a growth spurt, and so they moved me positions, so they wanted me to stay behind and learn that new position. Nonetheless, sidebar. Our team was undefeated all the way through. We were beating up on people pretty decently. We had a couple close games, but we pulled that out in the end. Everyone else we were beating up pretty good. And one of the teams that we beat up was Harrisburg High School. Now, for those of you not geographically inclined or know anything about Oregon and the Mid-Valley region, Harrisburg is about 10 to 20 miles north of Eugene. They were in our league. Earlier that year, we beat them by about 30 points. At least, I think. If I remember correctly, that game we put up 80s, I think. But I don't think it was that much of a massacre, so I could be wrong. I don't know. It's actually on YouTube, that video. Anyway, we were undefeated till the last game of the season. And with Harrisburg, they were sort of in a weird year, because usually they were pretty bad at a lot of sports. They were sort of the beat-em-up, tune-up game, like Idaho, I guess, was supposed to be. But they were sort of getting better. They were getting better athletes. I knew a couple that were on the team outside of the sports arena. And we played them our last game of the season. And they wanted nothing more than to ruin our undefeated season. And they did. We had a it was one of the most off nights you could possibly have as a team that we had. We were off on just about everything. Sloppy all around. And they came to play. They were flying around the court. They were swatting at every ball we could possibly throw up. They wanted to win, and they sort of bragged at us on the side of their mouths, muttering that undefeated no more. But they sort of earned those bragging rights, and we sort of just slept walked into that game, thinking we were, even on an off day, we were going to cruise, and we didn't. And that was the story that popped in my head when I was mad, because I'm like, there it is. This is why I say that, because that wasn't the only game that's ever happened either. And sometimes we were the spoiler team too. Not that we were bad, but we were definitely on paper supposed to get blown out by a certain team, and we ended up winning. So I've seen both sides of the coin personally of the any given Sunday, any given Saturday thing. And you can't sleepwalk on that. This is also why I was previously talking about we should probably bring back the win the day mantra, because we were looking theoretically, it looks like the Ducks were looking so far ahead. They were trying to achieve the hype that they had preseason that they kind of forgot they were playing in a game. And they almost got snuck up on. And to a certain point, Dan Lanning and the coaches are going to have to open up the playbook. They can't keep holding their cards close to their chest. I know that this was supposed to be a tune-up game, and it was supposed to be kind of vanilla, like a scrimmage, basically. But they opened up their playbook, and they almost snuck one up. And it was hard to watch, and we deserved to drop. I know Duck fans as a community knew that. We said, if we don't drop, that'll sort of be a travesty. And frankly, personally, I don't know if anyone else agrees with me in the Duck community. You can comment, like, and subscribe below and tell me. But a lot of us thought we should drop a little farther. Now, those are the realistic fans. Those are the fans that are in tune. And this is why, though, I'm calling this an intervention. Because there were other people that were saying, oh, it was just first game jitters. They'll get over it. They got it now. Just completely sort of delusional. And I'm not saying completely delusional in a pejorative way necessarily. Or, hey, we got the win. And I know Achilles Smith has said this, so he has more credibility than me. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But this is why I'm saying this is an intervention now. We're not winning it this year. Kirby Smart started head coaching Georgia in 2016, and they didn't win their first national championship till 2021. Honestly, frankly, if Dan Lanning brought us home one this year, it would be a miracle. It would be a welcome miracle. Believe me, I will celebrate just as much as everybody, except I'll be doing it on the beach. But it would also be quite the timeline that he was able to beat Kirby Smart at Georgia and bring the national championship home. We're just now getting past the Cristobal recruiting era and going into the Dan Lanning era. And someone brought up the fact that, and I was noticing this too with the recent classes, I said we're gunning very hard at a lot of receivers. We're almost a little too deep at receiver. I'm like, where are all the O-linemen? Because, again, that's the statistics. The Seahawks won their first NFL Super Bowl championship, and that year they figured out the formula was that they spent a lot of their salary cap money on the O-line, if actually the large majority of it. And they won that year, and that was usually the going pattern for teams. So I really hope we do that in the future, investing in that. But anyhow, Kirby Smart took 5 years to bring Georgia their national championship finally. And then they won the next year. They won back-to-back. But it took 5 years to get that first one. Now, these are issues. Let me restart this. This is an intervention for you Duck fans. We're not winning. So those of you that keep calling it forever are need to stop, for one, because we're making excuses for bad behavior, and that's not going to fly, and that's not going to win championships. Isn't that what we want? I know you're eager. I'm just as eager as much as you. Like I said, seems to be a lot of pundits out there that are equally as eager to see that happen finally. Number 2, you should not have pregame jitters with a team that you should walk all over. Okay, you're not playing LSU like USC did. They didn't have jitters even then, it seemed like, because they won. They did a very good job. Congratulations, USC. They're looking pretty good, at least in that game. There was no excuse for that. And I know they know that. Because Dan Lanning looked pissed. There's a lot of points left on the table there. We'll get to that in a little bit as well. There was, we're not, just no more excuses, okay? We're not the same team, okay? Here's the problem. We have a lot of fans that are still stuck in the 80s and 90s. And oh my gosh, we should be grateful that we have a win. Against an FCS team, Idaho. Like I said, Idaho's a very good FCS team. But again, it should literally be the difference between high school and a very good college team at that point. I'm not denigrating the FCS. I'm not denigrating Idaho. My point is, though, on paper, the reason why you're a 44.5 point favorite is because you're supposed to do that, even on a bad day. Looks like we're about a half hour till kickoff as well, so it's almost my bedtime because I got to work early in the morning, so hopefully, but we'll get to that. We're getting to a lot of things. So, don't be so confident, though, that it's like, oh, yeah, they're going to recover. They're going to crush them next time. And I'll get to the Boise State game that's coming up, too. Like I said, I apologize I'm a little late, but we'll see how it goes. But we have a generation, almost 2 generations of people that are used to a mediocre program. So to them, a win is a win. But this, again, we deserve to have dropped, and this win felt more like a loss. Thank God it wasn't, because we'd be like Notre Dame right now. But it was definite. It was definite a moral loss that had a lot of ramifications in the game. Like it was a loss. Now, for the other side of the fans, well, let me finish that up though, because we're in a different era now. Okay, we're not always a mediocre team. We had mediocre years since the 80s and 90s, but we're a largely successful football team. And we're trying not to plateau. We have plateaued for a long time. And I fear that's what's happening right now. Or about to. It's the reason why Cristobal honestly left. There is a plateau. It's probably why Chip Kelly left. Because they couldn't get over that hump. The plateau of just missing. And sure, the first national championship we've ever been in 2010. Sure, we can be the ones that are lucky to be there. But now we got a taste of it twice, and we missed it twice. When do we say, you know what, screw the blue blood saying that we don't belong? We do. We've been here before. We're going to finish what we started. So those fans need to have higher standards, because there is a standard. And the standard of winning has to meet that standard, or it's not a win that you should be happy with. This win was a relief. It wasn't anything to celebrate. It was a relief that we didn't lose. That we got lucky. Now, for the other side of the fans. The Harrisburg story just goes to show you, though, for me, my message to the other side of the fans. This could happen. Your team's not untouchable. And to both those sides of the fans, they need to actually have a come to Jesus moment and realize we have a target on our back. Not we, but the team. The team has a target on their back. On both sides. You have the blue bloods saying that you don't belong, and they want to smack you back into mediocrity. And then you have the teams below you, quote unquote, below you, that want to be a spoiler. And they're trying to figure out whichever way possible that they can win. That's why there was a reverse flea flicker that got Idaho their first touchdown. They were pulling out all the stops to win. They wanted to be that team. There's blood in the water on both sides. You got to watch your back and your front. Because you got teams like Alabama. You got Greg McElroy going all over ESPN, running his mouth about, oh, they're not SEC football. They're not Alabama. They'll never be Alabama. What are they even doing in the rankings? They don't belong. They're geographically not in the South. I know Greg McElroy doesn't sound like that, but I just want to make fun of him because he's a freaking elitist like the rest of them. And that's what you're battling on the front end. And then you got people behind you. You're not at the top of the mountain yet. You're in the middle. So you got people trying to keep you from the top of the mountain, and you got others trying to climb over you. This is where we're at, or like where the program is right now. And people need to realize that. And start figuring it out and focus up. Now, to the good and to the bad, which eventually became an ugly win. I'm very proud of that one. So, I got paper here because I'm old. School. Week 1. So, Dillon Gabriel went 41 for 50, I believe, is the actual official stat, for 380 yards, 2 TDs, which equals out to my rough math about 7 to 8 yards per throw. He was sacked once, I believe, in the red zone for a fumble, and it was recovered by Idaho. So that was 7 points left on the board. And the offense had the ball 39 minutes and 15 seconds. About 70% of the game, it seems. The offense had 31 first downs. And they put up 24 points. There was at least 14 to 21 more points left on the board there. Probably more like 24 because there was a couple missed field goals, I believe, too. 1 for 3 on fourth down conversions. There's no way that a team that should be dominating the line of scrimmage on fourth and shorts should be 1 for 3 on their conversions. They only got lucky and went like 7 for 16 on third down. They had very good third down conversions. Now, this is highly indicative of an offensive line problem because there was 2.9 yards per carry rushing. Jordan James did the best he could and only rushed for about 100 yards on like 30-something carries, basically. Well, Jordan James and Whittington. Whittington was running scared, and I'm not saying running away. He didn't have as much power and presence and break tackle ability as he did last year. Now, I don't blame him. He definitely could have game jitters because it's been almost a full calendar year since he stepped foot on a field. So, from injury. So, you're still having to get over the sort of yips, if you will, of wondering if your knee, like Boobie Miles in Friday Night Lights, is just going to snap the second you make a cut. Or I guess like Dennis Dixon in 2007, where he thought he was okay, tried to make one cut, and his leg basically folded in half and ruined everyone, including his season that year. And Jordan James, though, couldn't find a lane and tried as best he could to find one. He found a couple sometimes, but nothing to write home about, if you will. It seemed like after the first touchdown of that game, Oregon just kind of coasted. They thought they let their foot off the gas and they thought they were just going to walk this team into the fourth quarter, but they didn't go quietly into the night. Which goes to say, though, Dillon Gabriel should not have thrown 50 times in that game. He should have been out by the end of the third quarter at least. We should have seen some Dante Moore and possibly some Austin Novosad. But he had to stay the whole game and throw 50 times. Very good completion percentage. He distributed the ball well. Didn't turn it over outside of the fumble, but throwing the ball, he did not turn it over. He was very efficient. He distributed the ball to so many wide receivers, and frankly, thank God for Tez, because he was like all of our scoring. Tez for Prez, by the way. That's the new hashtag I'm starting, Tez for Prez. Because he seems to obviously be the guy that bails us out every chance that we need him to. Like he did that a lot last year, and this year is seeming to prove to be true. He still had a QBR of 56, I believe. It was definitely in the 50s. And because he was playing conservative, he took one shot down the field to Evan Stewart. Barely missed him. The guy was draped all over Evan Stewart, and Evan Stewart almost caught it still, but he didn't. Then it was dink and dunk the rest of the night. They need to have him take more shots down the field, but in order to do that, he needs more time to throw. And not be running for his life and take those shots. But the bottom line is, we can't get away with 24 points on 380 yards passing 50 times. We either need a lot more yardage and a lot more scoring. That's a whole lot of work for nothing. Especially when you don't have a run game, when they stuff the run game. That's a whole lot of yardage and passing for not much gain. No ROI on that. And the basis behind this terrible play, though, on the offense, something we haven't seen in a long time. I like that they're talking about the Ducks' defense more. I was always sick of saying the hearing. Again, one of those things I had to sit there and defend the Alamo of my team, that they're not soft, they're not all offense. They had a decent defense, so on and so forth. When there were years that, defense was terrible with like Don Pelham and stuff. But the Aliotti era and such, there were some decent defenses, but the offense still got all the credit. The reason, though, for this piss-poor performance by the offense was the O-line. They couldn't block. They couldn't hold even. They had a lot of, what's the phrase that they use? Execution errors? Not really. Formation. There was twice they were called for illegal formation. How do you have an O-line that doesn't know how to properly line up? Now, this is where the Matthew Bedford injury probably played a lot more into it than we all think. And Oregon's 8 penalties for 60 yards versus Idaho's 3 for 15 yards proved to be a lot of drive-killing things. That was a lot of points left on the table, too. And a lot of that was the O-line. And obviously Bedford's injury and other sort of O-line injuries was definitely more present in that game than expected. Because once I heard that, I was like, okay, that makes sense. But that's still a problem, obviously, because you will need depth on the O-line. Those guys are in the trenches. They get injured a lot, rolled up on and everything. Excuse me. It makes sense, though, because there was one play, especially in the red zone, one of the sacks that Dylan Gabriel got. I saw interior O-lineman looking around like he was late for work and he couldn't find his keys. He looked lost. But that explains it, because they got shuffled around at the beginning. And again, this is not an excuse, but they got shuffled around the O-line. There was a center that was a right guard that was a center, a tackle that was a guard, and they just got shuffled around like a 3-card Monty. Now, it's very difficult to do that with the O-line because it is one of the more finicky positions on the field, if not the most, because every separate O-lineman has separate assignments for every play, or almost every play, whatever you want to call it. It's not like a wide receiver can be moved to slot. It's generally sort of the same. I know that because I was a wide receiver. It's not like a cornerback moving to the other side of a cornerback, or even safety. Again, I played corner and safety back in my day. There's not a huge transition with that. D-line, probably second in line after the O-line, but still probably a little easier to shift and move around the positions. But the O-line, they have to go against the big boys. They got to get a push, and they have their particular assignments every single time. And those assignments change all the time based on the play, based on the pre-play stuff, based on their reads. And if you're not playing that position and you get moved to another one, it's hard. It's hard to know what's the proper course of action and what's not, because you're like, I don't know, I'm a right guard, I'm not a left tackle. And I think there's a lot of right tackles that forget or have forgotten that Dylan Gabriel's a lefty, so now he's the blind side, not the left tackle. He's the blind side guy. Whereas when you're sort of not the blind side guy, you're the tackle that's the quarterback's facing, you can kind of get away with being a little lazy, because at least the quarterback can see and make his moves. But when you're the blind side, you have to make sure that blind side is covered. So this needs to clean up big time before Boise State, which is happening in about 10 minutes. Because Boise State is one of those teams that, one, has had the Ducks number for a long time. We are 0-3 all-time against them, even on years that we've had, quote-unquote, better rosters. This is also one of those years. But guess what? They're one of those teams that's behind us, trying to climb up over us on that mountain. They want to be spoilers. They are a team that is built on being the dark horse a lot. Like I mentioned earlier, they feel like that they've been snubbed before in the BCS because they've been conference champions and gone undefeated when other conferences, specifically the Pac-12, had beat each other up the whole year, and no one is undefeated or highly ranked in that one. But since they were in the WAC and then the Mountain West, they get left behind because they're in a smaller conference. So they like to overachieve with the smaller roster, like the Ducks used to do, which those fans need to get that out of their head, though. We're not a team that overperforms with less anymore. We have 4- and 5-star recruits consistently. We've had a few years, or at least a couple years, of top 10 classes. We can't trade that for having top classes that underperform. I'm going to keep putting that on people. But Boise State's going to be ready to go, just as much as Idaho, especially now because they definitely see blood in the water now. They see the vulnerabilities. They already knew the vulnerabilities, basically. But now they really see it because an FCS team almost exposed them. This can't happen in the future, especially, like I said before, with Big Ten teams for sure. But it's not a walk in the park till we get to the Big Ten Conference. This needs to clean up ASAP because we can't have that kind of performance, especially against a team like Boise State. And with Oregon State, they'll probably see blood in the water too. And they're going to go all out. They got nothing to lose either. Idaho and Oregon State have nothing to lose. And Boise State feel like they still have the upper hand on the Ducks. They don't have nothing to lose. They very much could go on a run and be in a good spot. But they feel like they got the Ducks number. And it doesn't matter who's on the team and it doesn't matter who's the coach. They got us. So that needs to change. ASAP, obviously, because in 10 minutes it's kickoff. And I got to go to bed, so I'm only going to see part of the game. But moving forward, that has to change quick. And hopefully that just means that Bedford and the O-line finally gets healthy. But we're not going to be able to hold our cards close to the chest. We're going to have to put our balls on the table and play some poker. Because that's what I mean. That's what I call. That's why I said the Idaho and Oregon game was an awkward matchup, because this team was opening up the whole playbook, and the Ducks were playing vanilla, so they were able to sort of read everything. The O-line, man. We can't in the Big Ten and wanting to be a national championship team, we can't have a vulnerability like the O-line. Ooh, that was a nice hit. Too bad Colorado's down by too much for it to matter. Now, for the good. The defense, despite the scoreboard, played very, very well, all things considered. The defense had 2 interceptions. Nico Reed had the game-winning interception, basically. And Brandon Johnson had one other touchdown-saving defense, or interception. Brandon Johnson was sort of the unsung hero of that game in the secondary, which apparently we need to get healthy too. But, luckily we have some, depth in it. They played well enough. And Brandon Johnson had a key PI in the beginning of the game. But, look, with defensive backs, you're going to have some PIs. You basically just have to sort of make sure that they don't happen at key points in the game. PIs are just inevitable. Unfortunately, like I said, I used to play defensive back, and I played in the secondary when I played football. And it was just, especially now, even back then, everyone was running an eye offense, running it up the gut every play. So you basically just, when you were a receiver, you stock blocked. When you were a cornerback, you just ran with the receiver because your job is boring on the field anyway. Nothing happens for you. But if you're now, especially with the rules basically being tie goes to the runner, if you will, and wide receivers have the edge and the advantage when it comes to offense versus defense, you're going to get some sort of penalty like that. So you kind of just have to eat it and hope it doesn't happen at a crucial time of the game. So, all in all, pretty decent performance. Idaho was held to 217 total yards. That is pretty darn good, considering that they had the ball for 20 minutes and 45 seconds that game. So it wasn't, the Ducks had it definitely more, twice the amount. But they had short fields, and that's why they were able to put up 14. Like I said, there was a trick play and then another short field because we did not convert on a 4th down. Because we were trying to get the offense going, because it wasn't. We gave them another short field, and that's also when the game was 17 to 14 or 7 to 14 or 14 to 17. It was close enough where Idaho was like, we could actually do this. So they got a short field and were very motivated to score. But to only give up 217 yards of total offense is good. That is a good performance, and a performance you should probably have versus an FCS school. So we'll see, though, with Boise State, especially with Gianti, how good they can really be. Gianti apparently can run over everybody. And again, you don't want to live up to that soft reputation and actually do something about it and do well. So, with that being said, 168 passing yards. Again, quarterback had a lot of short fields to work with. And then he had those 2 picks. So he still played a good game, all things considered. Was it Jack Lane, I think his name? He was a longtime Duck fan. Always wanted to play for him. Wasn't able to, so played for Idaho. So he had a lot of motivation to be a spoiler too. He did play a good game, despite the 168 yards passing for the game. And 2 interceptions. But that's all on defense. Good performance on that front too. The pass rush was pretty decent. The D-line looked good. Again, the linebackers is kind of a weak spot right now still. Hopefully Dan Lanning's building up on that because he should at least have a decent sort of view on linebackers, considering he used to be a linebacker coach, I believe. So hopefully that gets cleaned up. Sorry, I'm just switching to the Duck game because it's on another channel, of course, or another streaming service. Thank you, cable, for dropping the ball and letting streaming services become the new cable and basically be the same amount of money. And I told people that for 10 years, and they didn't listen. But so that's good. 20 rushes for 49 yards, 2.5 yards carry. Yes, that's good. Good run defense. So I was happy to see that performance out of the defense because, frankly, if our defense was any weaker, we definitely would have lost that game. If we had defenses we've had in the past, we definitely would have lost that game, especially because of the way the offense was playing, and that's why. But look, Oregon wasn't the only team. This win was ugly, but they weren't the only team that really struggled. So I have a list here, again, on my old school piece of paper. Ohio State was only up against Akron 17-3 at half. However, they finished 52-6. So halftime adjustments, that's another thing. Halftime adjustments, the Ducks need to do that better. And that has been an issue for Dan Lanning. He needs to figure out that weak spot in his game. Halftime adjustments. That's what cost us at Washington last year and the year before. And other games that we might have lost. Halftime adjustments. Don't be stubborn and say our plan is perfect and stick to it. Stick to it as much as you can, but change it enough, too, that you win. Michigan beat Fresno State 30-10. I'm assuming they were a higher spread than that. 20 points. Look, Fresno State used to be like a really great program. They were kind of the Boise State back in the day, a fly under the radar, solid program. They're kind of in a downtime, so that doesn't really look great. But 20 points is kind of a not great performance against Fresno State, and Michigan was up 10-3 at the half. Again, and then there was a FCS matchup too. Oklahoma State and South Dakota State. They were up 17-6 at half, but they finished 44-20. Kansas State played UT Martin, another FCS school. They were up 17-3 at half, but the score was 41-6. Arizona was down, I believe, to New Mexico, 27-24, but they ended up winning 61-39 in a shootout. Clearly, a basketball score there. And Oregon State played FCS squad Idaho State and were only up 17-9 at half, and they won 38-15. So they played two halves, pretty solid halves. So 3 out of those 5 games were close at half against FCS squads. So this wasn't necessarily an aberration. So it's not quite complete panic time yet, but I'm scared. I'm definitely scared. And we'll see how it goes with Boise. And then clearly with all the upsets that are happening, Notre Dame just lost to North Illinois. Congrats to them and the coach. They did a great job scheming and a great game played. Georgia Tech and then Miami. Is that who it was? Beat Florida State? No, it wasn't Miami. Sorry. Boston College beat Florida State when they were still top 10 before the AP polls changed the next day. So there were upsets, big upsets, and a lot of near misses. But the only difference, though, is the Ducks did not adjust and open up the game and open up that spread on the points. Colorado had a scare too, but against North Dakota State. But we gotta go back to win the day. We just gotta play every game like it's our Super Bowl. We gotta make sure we play well consistently and play every game as perfect as you can. You'll win more than you'll lose, and when you lose, it won't hurt as much, especially with the 12-team playoff now. But you can't have these type of games, especially when you have that much hype behind you. But I think that's the good, the bad, the ugly of it. We'll see what happens with Boise State. Like I said, the defense definitely has to show up and stop the run for sure. And do that, hit that play action pass game based off a good run game. And the offense needs to step up, and the offensive line needs to immediately set the tone, because unfortunately the tune-up game at the first game of the season last week was supposed to be a tone-setting game for the season, and that's why it was really disappointing, because it kind of promised that we were coming out with a bang, and it really was more like a whoopee cushion fart in church. Did not go over very well. So we need to make a statement game. This game is going to be our Super Bowl. It's become, and it already was, but it's become a lot more important than even before. This is a very important, significant game. So with that being said, go watch the game. Go Ducks.